Hello, the purpose of this video module is to demonstrate the capabilities of Foglight Experience Viewer to create a filter on specific hits. To begin the demonstration, I want to search for a page that I know I have some type of information that I'm after. So I'll do that search by path. And what I'm going to look for is I want to look for my exception page. And on that exception page, I'll then be able to see how I want to create the filter. So usually when you're going to create a filter, what you do is you replicate the type of search that you want the filter to do. You replicate that in a regular search from the regular search screen, which is on the user interface of the appliance. So now that I have the search and I've got all these exception pages up, I can take a look at one of the exception pages and kind of make a decision on what I want to capture out of there. So you'll see right here that this is on my exception page. It's getting this invalid format error. And what I want to do on this page is, instead of having to drill down to see what this exception is, I want to remove, or not remove, but I want to copy this value. I want the exception code invalid format to be part of my metadata available in this search, as opposed to having to drill down every time to see which specific exception that user had. So that's my first requirement, is to get that in the search results. My second requirement is to create metrics for every unique value of this error. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate now. So to begin, once I have the page, I need to see where this information comes from inside the source. And this will allow me to programmatically cut that out as these different ones come in. So I can click on the hit source in the replay, and then I could search for that error code 5794, which shows up in the page right here. Now, generally what we're going to do to work with this is we want to cut out a piece of that content before and after. So we're going to work with this in our builder so that we can look at these different items. Okay, so now I have the piece of the code in the page surrounding the text that I'm after, with the anchor point and everything. So now I could come and go configure and go to hit analysis, and this is where my filters are defined. So I'm going to define a new hit filter here, and this is I'm looking for the exception page, so I'm going to create a hit filter, and I'm going to call that hit filter the exception page, so that I'm basically looking for the same thing, and I'll be able to search on this filter later on. I'm going to add a condition here, and I'm going to do the same thing like I did in my search. I'm going to do the search based on the request URL. So I only want to look, well, actually let's do it like we did it in the search. Let's do it on the path. So I only want to look for that exception page and nothing else. So this way I know what page it is, and then I can start looking at the content. So if I were to leave this match conditions blank, if I were to put nothing here, it would match every single hit. So anytime you're doing a full content search, it's a better optimization to restrict the number of hits that you're going to search the content for. If I needed to, I can change error conditions here. So I can add a condition, and I could say, if I see this request path and the city equals New York, or if the end-to-end time is over 5 seconds, I can set all these exceptions so that I could mark this hit as an error. For this use case, I'm not going to use the error or the warning conditions, but I just wanted to point those out. You can also execute a script. And what a script is useful for is if you want to look for a certain value and transform that value, maybe perform a mathematical calculation on it, or maybe do a lookup. You say, if request field product type equals A, then it's lawn and garden. If product type equals B, then it's lumber. If product type equals C, then it's hardware. So you can do different case statements like that in scripts too. So you're basically transforming a value instead of using the value directly from the filter. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a custom field, and I'm going to call this custom field, because I'm getting, basically this is the exception page, and I want to get the exception code out of the exception page. So now what I have to do is I have to tell it where on that page am I going to get this code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look in the response content because that's the only place that that information is available. Now if I click on this, this lets me put a search string for my response content to tell me what the anchor point is that I'm looking for. So I can use this tester to make sure that I have it right. Now I copied the section of the page before that I was interested in to get that data from. And basically what I'm looking for out of this piece that I cut out, I'm looking for that specific error code in there. So this is the invalid format, 5794, that's the error code I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick an anchor point here that looks pretty specific to that. And that looks like this variable right here, this result message. And then it has an LBL fail. So I'm going to take it all the way up to here, and I'm going to use that as my anchor point to search for that message. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build an expression that says search up till the first closed paren that you see. So I'll put that in there. And then after that I have to tell it, now it's going to say, what do I want to capture? So I open a paren and I put a wild string in. So I want to capture everything from the beginning of the string, so that's what the question mark says, up until, and I would put up until my last closed paren. And then I close the parens for the match string. Now what I can do is I can test this expression, and it'll run the expression against this text right here, and it'll give me my result in the bottom. So basically this now cuts that invalid format, 5794, it cuts that out. So I'm going to use this expression, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to update the hit. Update the hit, and I'm going to show this in the search results. So now when I do a hit, when I do a search on this specific filter, which is my exception page filter, I'm going to see this value marked as exception code. I'm going to see that in my metadata from this point on. I can also update the session if I wanted to, but in this case I'm just going to update the hit. Now one other thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to create besides a custom field, I'm going to want to create some metrics. And this one is a little bit tricky to understand, but it's really powerful once you get into the UI and understand what it's doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this exception, and I'm going to put a dash here, and I'm going to put a $0. So this is basically creating what we call a dynamic metric. What that means is the name of the metric isn't populated until it gets a value. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to go and say that my response content is where I'm going to get the information to populate $0. And with the response content, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's create a string here. And I'm going to use that same string that we used up here. That same regular expression that we created. I'm going to do that again, so this way I can have all the information that this field has. Okay, so we're going to create a bunch of metrics, and it'll be a unique metric for every value of an exception. And it's going to increment these metrics by 1. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say OK. First sampling for this metric, we can come up to Foglight, we can go to our FXV filters page. On the FXV filters page, we should see the name of the head filter that we created, which was exception page. And I see the first exceptions coming in, my invalid format error. Now you remember we created that dynamic metric with the $0. So I have exception, and then the $0, it fills in the value that it got out of the actual content. So this is a dynamic metric. So as other exceptions came in, like instead of invalid format, let's say we have interface error, error 5768. It'll actually create a new metric for you and start counting that metric from that point on. This way you'll be able to go to your exception page, and you'll be able to do an analysis of all the different types of exceptions you had over time. Now from here what we can do is we can click on these values, and once you click on the values, this will drill you into the sessions, or actually do a search on that error page. So this is a in-context link that takes you back, and now here's the search results with all my exception codes with that invalid format error. And then I can click on it and it would take me into the session. So now I have a real quick navigation to get down to all these errors that happen.